I started working on my comic Silver Road a little over 2 years ago. Well, I've been coming up with ideas a few years longer than that, but 2024 was when I first started actually writing and drawing the chapters. Now, with 12 chapters of the comic, the first story arc is complete. Land of Discovery is done, and the story Silver Road will be continued in the next arc. Now that I've completed a significant chunk of the comic, I'd like to reflect on what I did. I'd like to go over some of the motivations behind the decision making that went into the comic. I'd also like to reflect on what I enjoyed about making the comic, what would I improve, and where the comic might go in the future. Before I start this discussion, I'm going to be going all out in the spoilers in this video. Expect there to be spoilers for any part of Land of Discovery. If you want to remain spoiler free, then stay away from the rest of this video for now, and check out the comic if you're interested. Let's begin. When I started producing my comic, I had planned for there to be 5 major story arcs. Land of Discovery is the first of the 5. I want each arc of the comic to have a distinct identity and tone. For the first arc of the comic, it felt appropriate to stick to a relatively laid-back tone. There are moments of peril and horror, but I wanted Land of Discovery to remain simple and optimistic for the most part. The name Land of Discovery was chosen because the word discovery reflects the tone I wanted the arc to have. Discovery implies exciting adventure, curiosity, and a relative low amount of peril. It also fits the inquisitive nature of Seven and Samilla, 2 characters that the arc centers around. I plan for later arcs to follow the Land of something or other naming scheme, though their variations will suit different tones. The relatively laid-back tone of Land of Discovery is paired with the aquatic and oceanic themes of the arc. I want each arc to more or less follow the theme of some kind of landscape feature. For Land of Discovery, the feature is water. Many of this arc's chapters take place near some sort of prominent water feature. There's lakes, swamps, streams, shores, and even the bottom of the ocean. I wanted this arc to feel like a summer trip down to the seaside. The location of Baker's Bay, a vibrant boardwalk amusement park, embodies this tone well. This theme is taken even further with the location of Clamp City, a whimsical underwater town which feels like a coral reef, and finally Samilla's lab, which feels like the dark and sinister depths of the ocean floor. For the most part, my goal is for each arc of Silver Road to focus on a single character's development. For Land of Discovery, the focus character is Seven. The characters of Astery, Sam, and Guyana also develop, but they're not the main focus. Even a character like Guyana, who is the center of Silver Road's main plot, is not exactly the focus of the character arcs in Land of Discovery. For Seven, I wanted his character arc to be simple and lower stakes. Years ago, when I was developing the characters of Silver Road, I realized that Seven could serve a valuable role as the team's connection to normalcy. He never knew Ari, so his presence can remind his friends that there's a larger world outside their own troubles. Seven has his own problems, but they're more manageable than those of the other characters. I decided a character arc that would fit Seven is all about the role he plays in being a good friend. He's eager to help out as much as he can. He learns how to comfort his friends by listening in the Serpent's Canyon chapters. He applies logic to solve his problems at the Abalone Headlands. Honeyglade's Moments explores Seven's relationship to family legacy and traditions, which is explored further in Sunken Archives with his relationship with his hammer. It's tradition for the wielders of the hammer to be logical and in control of their situation, but this is challenged when Seven realizes that his desperate grasp over keeping control doesn't always make things better. Seven has to realize his mistakes with his attempts to help Samilla. He questions if his lack of trauma means that he's not the person his friends need. In the end, he learns that his life experiences don't make him any less human. Rationality isn't evil, but it's one of the things that makes him human. He can try his best, but even if his best is misguided, that doesn't mean he should stop trying his best and learning. Aquarle and Samilla are characters that are closely involved with Seven's arc. I figured that Seven would naturally want to repair his relationship with Samilla and return it to the way it was before. That's what he wants, but it's not what he needs. When I was developing Aquarle, I figured she could embody the idea that sometimes relationships don't return back to normal. Aquarle was once friends with Guyana and Astery, but after the death of Ari, their friendship shattered. Seven and Samilla's relationship suffered a similar fate. I saw an interesting opportunity in exploring Seven and Aquarle's dynamic. Aquarle doesn't have a history with Seven, so Seven is able to comfort her like a kind stranger. Together, they come to the realization that there are ways to rebuild their relationships, without returning them back to their status quo. Aquarle is slowly trying to rebuild her friendships from scratch. Seven has to accept that his relationship with Samilla isn't going to be happy and intimate in the same way it was before, and that's okay. Now I'd like to reflect on what went well in Land of Discovery. It's hard for me to judge objectively the quality of my comic and what its strengths are, but I think something I am qualified to judge is what parts I enjoyed making the most. I'm going to avoid assuming that some parts of the comic are well written or well drawn, but I will reflect on what experiences of making the comic I think were the best. One part of making the comic that was fun was characterization. I enjoyed finding ways to give each character charming qualities. Silver Road isn't a comedy story, but when I had an idea for a fun or stupid bit to put in the comic, I welcomed the opportunity to give the characters more life. There are moments like the hike at Serpent's Canyon where the characters are just having conversations. There's the parts where they get to have fun and let loose at Baker's Bay and interact with Seven's Uncle Tony. There's the part at Clam City where they're trying desperately not to seem like tourists at Miss Fizz's bar. It's hard for me to judge whether some of these moments were actually funny, but what's important is that I had fun. When it comes to characterization, some of my favorite things to write are characters such as Samilla. I wanted to lean hard into the goofy but maniacal evil mad scientist archetype. It felt appropriate for the more upbeat tone of Land of Discovery to have a simple but gleefully evil villain. It was fun to write her egotistical monologues and the way she taunts the main characters. When I was writing the final battle of Samilla, I knew that I wanted her to give her big final monologue during the fight, like a boss in Undertale. I was relishing in it. It was also fun to write Seven's Mirror Demon. Some of the other versions of the Mirror Demon depicted in Land of Discovery are on the more emotionless and eerie side. I wanted Seven's demon to be a twisted reflection of his more optimistic attitude. So I made his demon something between a jester or a TV host that relentlessly mocks him with a face frozen in laughter. I also found it enjoyable to explore the depths of everyone's character. It was interesting to dig deep into the characters of Seven or Aquarle and find out what makes them tick. I always find it an interesting challenge to ask myself why a character acts the way they do, and then figure out how a character would act based on their motivations. There are a few plot points and chapters that stood out to me as being interesting to write. Chapter 5, The Soda Sea, is set in an alternate world inhabited by Ari and her friends. I was initially going to give it the same comic format as the rest of Silver Road, but as I was about to start drawing, I was struck by inspiration. I decided to give the chapter some storybook-style narration. There are still scenes of speech bubbles, but I also added narration that describes the world from Ari's point of view. I like this idea because it sets apart the setting of Rinth from the rest of the comic. It gives the chapter a more whimsical feel. I also saw it as an interesting device to explore Ari's character. Ari is a character who has a pretty unique perception of the world. Every sensation and moment is special to her, so I wanted the narration to highlight these sensations from her perspective. The chapter also takes some mysterious turns, where the reality of Ari's world seems to shift. I'm not going to reveal the mystery yet, but these scenes were also an opportunity to have the style of the narration reflect the sinister tone shift. Until I reveal more, it's up to you to interpret what that means. The scene in Chapter 6, Do You Even Love Her, where Aquarle sings her Song of Anger, was one of the most interesting scenes to write and draw. I have very little experience writing song lyrics, and I don't know if the ones I wrote were actually good at all, but it was a fun experience. I enjoyed writing the song lyrics to reflect how Aquarle is trying different methods to make each member of the main team cry. That scene was also really fun to format and draw. I think it's one of the most inspired uses of comic elements in Silver Road so far. Chapter 9, Honey Glazed Moments, was an interesting challenge that ended up feeling very cozy. I wanted to do a much more low-stakes chapter, while still giving it a plot that actually goes somewhere. I struggled for some time trying to figure out a plot for that chapter, but I ended up having the goal for the characters be trying to remember their happiest childhood memories. I knew this would be especially troublesome for Sam, because his memories of Ari are mostly blocked. This ended up being a very laid-back goal for the characters to achieve, while still requiring some effort and some development for them. I enjoyed coming up with the nice memories for all the characters, and I think each memory illustrates each character well. It was a conscious choice to have everyone's happiest memories involve Ari, with the exception of Seven. While these memories are wholesome, it's also sad that the center of everyone's happiness is no longer around. Chapters 9 and 10 combined were interesting for me in terms of exploring Seven's character. I wanted Chapter 9 to explore Seven's spirituality, which is tough for him because he's a very logical person. This chapter concludes that Seven experiences spirituality through his family's cooking traditions. Chapter 10 explores Seven's relationship with tradition further, with his hammer, which has a long history of wielders. Just as Seven is a link in the chain of his family's traditions, he's also a part of the chain of his hammer's legacy. Another moment that stands out to me is the rescue mission in Chapter 11. I was planning for Samil to capture Guyon and Astery for a while. Still, my plan was for Astery and Guyon to both just be unconscious and kept in some pods or tanks somewhere. Then, inspiration struck that made me feel like a dungeon master who has a sadistic idea. I decided that Samela would have the means to puppeteer their bodies, and even have them fight Sam and Seven. Guyon still ended up strapped to a machine somewhere, but for Astery, I decided that Samila would try to take her body on a test drive, and Sam would be there to witness it. It's a really messed up thing for Samilla to do, which makes the conflict and drama in the final chapters feel more interesting. Now I'd like to go over some parts of Land of Discovery that I might approach differently with the new wisdom I have. I don't intend to go back and edit the story, but I would like to acknowledge what I think are some weaknesses of the story so far, and hopefully learn from them. Character introductions in the story are important. The first thing a character does in a story is a valuable first impression for them. For the most part, I think I introduced the characters fine. Guyana is introduced in the middle for Reaper duties, using empathy and thoughtfulness to help guide a ghost to the next stage of existence. Astery is introduced giving some morning announcements at Camp Silver, showcasing her confidence and fun-loving nature. Seven is introduced sharing a meal he made with his friends, showcasing his creativity and kindness. Sam doesn't really have an introduction like this, he just kind of appears. I like to think that Sam's stoic but heroic attitude is apparent now, but he really could have benefited from an introduction that helps establish that characterization. In my video on episodic storytelling, I explained how it took me until a few chapters into Silver Road to really put thought into how a chapter is structured. In Silver Road, each chapter moves the main plot forward in some way, but I think that a chapter is strongest when it has its own strong central theme. Episodic storytelling is a great opportunity to establish a simple basic premise, and explore that premise from different angles in chapters which have their own bite-sized arc. Silver Road is established to be about Guyana and the team finding spirits and requesting boons from them. Each spirit represents a concept or a part of the world. This is a great opportunity to explore what connections the characters have to the world in each chapter. Still, I think some earlier chapters lacked this approach that could have made them stronger. An example that often comes to mind is Chapter 4, Dozing Off. While I think this chapter is strong in terms of balance of tone, in retrospect, it's not quite as strong as its own individual chapter. There's a lot of important things happening, but there's not much that ties them together. If that chapter explored the theme of sleep or dreams more as a central theme, that could make the chapter feel more cohesive. Another thing I think I could have expanded on more is Seven's flaws. Seven's flaw is that he sometimes tries too hard to be in control. He wants everyone to be happy, but he struggles with not letting people be sad when they need to. He struggles with reading the room. There are a few moments where we see this flaw in Seven. There's the moment at the end of Do You Even Love Her where he tries and fails to have some light conversation with his friends. When it comes to Samilla, he's characterized as encouraging his friends to not turn to violence so easily, and have a more steady approach to helping her. When Astery and Guyana are captured, Seven thinks it's because he tried to be too gentle with Samilla, not considering his friend's concerns for self-defense. Then there's a page at the end of Workshop of Curiosities that flashes back to when Seven and Samilla broke up, where Seven was essentially telling her that she shouldn't be sad. I made some attempt to show Seven's flaws, but I would have liked to have gone further. I think there's enough to show that Seven isn't perfect, but I think I could have given him at least a couple more inappropriately timed jokes to really show that he has some developing to do. Seven does have to learn at the end that he's not as bad as a friend that he thinks he is, so it makes sense that he feels guilty over very little, but I think I could have given him a more robust reason to feel ashamed. So what am I doing next? The next arc of Silver Road will be called Land of Secrets. I'm not going to reveal any story details right now, but there will be a different character whose arc is focused on. Something I want to do in Land of Secrets is think more about chapter structure. I want each chapter to have a stronger individual arc, on top of the role they play in the main story. I've discussed this thinking multiple times already. I have plans for other spirits that the characters interact with, and interesting dynamics that may come from those interactions. I also want to change up some of the art in Land of Secrets. I've been experimenting with adjusting the art style slightly. Nothing too dramatic, but I want the comic to be more fun for me to draw. When I looked at my old art from my Scratch Art Dump video, some of the later pieces in there had an energetic, bold style that I feel like I've strayed away from over the years. I realized how much I like that direction for my style, so I want to lean more into that again. The characters are also going to get some redesigns. They'll still be recognizable, but I'm going to change up their outfits a bit. I figure it'll be fun to redesign their outfits to fit the tone of Land of Secrets, but also make their design stronger in general. There's some concepts that I plan to introduce in Land of Secrets that will really give the world of Silver Road some more definition. I plan to dive deeper into aspects of the culture of the Hawk Mountains, and I also plan to solidify the identity and branding in a way of the main team. They'll gain access to some resources that will make their lives and mine easier, some of which probably should have been there from the start. Also, I'm tired of just calling them the main characters of Silver Road, or the main team. Get ready for them to get a team name soon. It's been a pleasure working on Silver Road so far, and it's great to have its first arc concluded. I'm excited for what comes next in Land of Secrets. It's going to go in some interesting directions. Land of Discovery is going to feel like a pilot in comparison. Hope you found my reflection on my comic so far interesting. Goodbye, everybody. Sam wishes you well.